Hello guys and welcome to another video. For today's video I teamed up with ARTEZA. ARTEZA is an online art store and they basically sent me paints for testing purposes and yeah, I just do a quick review and will let you guys know how I like the paints. ARTEZA sent me 2 pads of watercolor paper. Each pad includes 32 sheets, and as you can see, as we get closer, the paper has a really great structure. To be honest, I really like the structure. First of all, I thought it would be too much of a texture for my kind of art style, but in the end I really loved it. ARTEZA also sent me this amazing 6 deep gouache color set, which is super amazing because there are so many different shades of gouache in it. The outside of the box is pretty cool because they highlighted the light fastness, transparency and pigment number, so you have a pretty good overview what kind of colors are inside. Alright, so let's see what's inside the box. I'm just trying to open this up here. Okay, so here we have sets of 6 different kind of paints. I really like how they separated them in nice color schemes. ARTEZA also sent me another pack of metallic gouache paints, and here on the back side you see what kind of colors are inside. All different kind of metallic paints, but you will have these metallic paints also in the 60 gouache paints box. Another thing that I wanted to point out before starting the painting is that you shouldn't rely on the label because some colors look quite different. Just for instance, the ballerina pink doesn't even look like the label at all. What I would recommend before starting your painting is actually going in, getting the paper you want to use, and do some color swatches. Let them dry before you start so you can actually see how the color inside the tube looks. Once they are dried, you can actually compare them and see if that's the color you want to use. For me, this turned out to be really helpful, and I do that all the time when I use new paints. So for today's video, I'm going to paint a character and I'm going to use the ARTEZA gouache set and paper. I'm definitely going to use that gold metallic gouache because I haven't been using that before and I'm super excited how this is going to turn out. So when using gouache, I tend to use a bit of water. You could also use more water than I do, but as soon as you use more water, your paint will actually look a bit more blotchy depending on how you paint. So for my kind of style, I prefer less water to make sure that colors are pretty opaque and you kind of can't see through. By the way, I'm actually just using a couple paints. I don't want to mix too many colors because it would look too colorful. I tend to use like 3 or 4 different shades and then I mix different hues from it. In case you're mixing your own colors, make sure that you mix enough of the paint because if you run out of paint later, it's kind of hard to match the exact color again. Alright, so here I'm actually starting with the initial sketch. I did a couple sketches of this character before on regular paper with a pencil, and as soon as I was happy with the result, I started transferring the painting, and I did that by just using a window, holding the paper in front of the window and just transferring the painting. I'm using a red colored pencil. This is just out of preference because I feel like black is too dark and red mixes kind of better with the paint that I'm using. Make sure you keep your lines loose and don't put too much pressure on your pencil because otherwise you will see the lines later. So my painting is transferred and I can actually start painting now. I'm using a black color for the background, and something that I always tell people is to not use 100% black and 100% white because these colors are too intense. What I would do here, my background should be dark, but I don't want it to be 100% black. So I go in and mix it with lighter shades. So here I will be mixing a dark blue and a kind of beige color. Okay, so let's start painting. Here I'm going in and using a pretty dry brush because I want to have that white kind of edge around the painting, and by keeping the brush pretty dry you get that cool effect. And what I really like about the paper is that you can definitely see the structure now. As soon as I have the outlines done, I go inside and I use a bit more water because here I don't want to have these rough edges. I definitely want to have very clear outlines for the hair and for the body and stuff. So I try to use a bit more water to fill out the shapes. This took a little longer because it's the first time that I use ARTEZA Gouache and I don't want to mess up the painting, so I take my time testing things. And what I would recommend you guys is first of all taking a sheet of the paper that you're gonna use and make some tests. So I have an additional sheet of paper next to me, and I use it all the time to test the paint before I use it on the actual painting, so I can see how the color looks as soon as it's dried. The ARTEZA Gouache dries pretty quick, and especially the black is pretty opaque, which I really like about the gouache paint. So for traditional paintings I like to actually plan them out pretty well because I don't want to mess them up and I don't want to decide spontaneously how colors should look, because if you make mistakes you can't undo them. So what I did to make sure that my painting turned out good in the end, I used my iPad Pro, the Apple Pencil and Procreate app, and I did a very rough painting here, and I photographed the initial sketch and imported it to Procreate. I selected my color scheme in here. So this is a very good chance to switch colors around and see what matches together, and you'll be still able to make changes, which is pretty cool. So as soon as I figured out what kind of colors I want to use, I used the iPad to actually compare the gouache colors with the initial colors that I chose on my iPad. So I put both next to each other, and while I was mixing the colors, I was always looking at the iPad and checking if I'm matching the exact color value. I'm using an additional sheet of paper, and it's the same ARTEZA paper because I kind of want to see how colors turn out as soon as they are dried. and they can look quite different. So make sure you test them before you actually use them on your painting. If you feel like a color is too dark, you can still mix it with white to brighten it up. I'm testing the skin color on that additional sheet of paper, and if I feel like the skin is too dark, I'm still able to go in and mix it with white to make it brighter. Now I'm applying the skin color to the painting, and I noticed that the color is not as opaque as the black, but as soon as you use enough paint, it'll be opaque enough. Again, in my case, I don't want to use too much water, because if I use too much water, it will turn out to be a bit blotchy. In the past, I tried two different types of gouache. I tried Winsor & Newton and Schminke, and the gouache from Schminke felt super blotchy to me. Always when I mixed colors, I wasn't satisfied at all, because I felt like my painting looks so blotchy and the colors were super transparent sometimes. So then I switched to Winsor & Newton, and I felt like the colors were so much better and the mixing was so much easier and just felt so much more opaque and less blotchy. And here is what I really like about the ARTEZA Gouache paints. They are definitely much more affordable compared to Winsor & Newton, and I feel like that the quality is almost the same, because you don't have that blotchiness on your painting and they are pretty opaque, which is gorgeous. So as soon as I finished up the first layer of skin, I go in again and use a more saturated skin color, which is a little bit more pinkish. And I'm going to use that for her cheeks, for her shoulders, for her nose, and for her ears. And also for some shadows here and there. And I don't want to make hard lines here, I kind of want to blend it with the painting and with the skin. And what you could do is just dab the sponge on your painting so you get a pretty nice transition from skin to those more saturated values. And this is again a part where I really like the structure of the paper, because you can really see on her cheeks that this kind of texture is visible now, and I think it looks gorgeous. I really like that kind of effect. Honestly, usually I don't like cold pressed paper because it just doesn't match my style as long as I draw characters, and I would always prefer hot pressed paper. But in this case I really like it because I feel the texture actually adds some detail, and I don't know, it looks pretty cool. So now I go in and I mix the original skin color with darker paints. So I can use that darker skin tone to create some outlines. Now I'm going to use a smaller brush because I kind of want to add some details like the nose, nostrils, and yeah, the ears. For the lip color I go in and use again the skin color, but I mix it with some like pink colors. And now I'm going to start on the hair, and I use two different shades of that super bright yellow. Again, I don't want to use a white for the hair, I still want to have some saturation in it, and I use like a very slight beige, yellowish kind of tone. And yeah, I start by just blocking out the shape, and then later I go in and paint some details in. I separated the hair in two parts, and there's the front part which is a bit brighter and the back part which is a little bit darker, just to make them more separated from each other. And now I go in and paint some details, and I use both colors, the brighter color and the darker color, and I just go in and paint the strains. Don't paint too many because we still want to keep the painting simple, and I reduced them to the most important strains to get that kind of line flow in the hair. During that video, my camera turned off quite a few times because the battery needed to be charged, and I kind of had a problem sometimes and forgot to press record again. And yeah, I missed some little details in the end. So what I did here is I just went in and painted the eyelashes. I used again that kind of black bluish tone that I mixed in the beginning, and used a very thin brush and painted the eyelashes. I'm again using colors that I have been using before. This is something that you should always do, so you still stay in that color scheme. And yeah, here in that case I would go in and use the background color and add a little bit of brown to it, so you still have yeah, the same values. So I'm always reusing the colors that I used before. For the eyebrows, I go in and use a pretty dry brush again because I want to have that kind of structure, because it should look like hair, but I don't want to go in and draw every single hair strain. So the dry brush gives me exactly the effect that I want to have. And now my favorite part starts, because I was all the time super excited about the metallic gold. I haven't tried metallic gouache before, and I'm super excited how it's going to look, because I feel it could add so much more to the painting. So I didn't expect it to be that opaque, but it does look really good. Another thing that I would always recommend people is never start with super big areas, and never start with some of the most important areas. For example, most people tend to start with the face. I don't know why, but probably because this is the most exciting thing. But if you mess it up, then you messed up the entire painting, because this is like the main focus point. So what I learned after a while is that I actually always go in and I start with like the arms or the lower body part, and like again here I'm painting the necklace, and I would try to start with the thinner details, because if I make a mistake here, or if things don't look good, I still have the opportunity to make it better on the bigger parts, right? So for example, the earrings are definitely more eye-catching than the necklace, and if I make a mistake on the necklace, I don't think people would notice it as much as on the earrings, right? But yeah, I feel like the gold metallic gouache is pretty opaque and looks really good, and it's drying pretty quick and it's easy to apply, but it's getting quite hard on very little details. I wouldn't say it's from the gouache, it's more or less from my brushes, because I don't really have a very thin brush. So I came up with another idea. So for the very thin parts I used actually a gold ink pen, and yeah, it worked pretty well on that paper, even though it's structured, but it worked super good. And I felt like it's more easier than using a brush to paint all these little details. And luckily the kind of gold shade matched perfectly. If you want to add super small details, I used to go in and use a colored pencil, and what you could also do is using a white colored pencil to add some highlights. I did that on the eye to add a specular highlight, or to actually add some hair strains on the eyebrows, or the little specular highlight on the tip of the nose, or like extra hair strains on the hair. like very little details. This is actually a pretty great technique. I'm sorry guys, but again my camera turned off because the battery needed to be charged and I didn't notice it. But I was almost done with the painting anyway. What I do to give it some extra glitter effect, I actually go in and use gold glitter and some glue, and I just put the glue on the gold parts and I add just a little bit of glitter. Let's just also take a closer look at the paper. I feel like the paper is bending quite a lot, even though I didn't use too much water. That's maybe a point that I didn't like about the paper, because I feel like other brands or more expensive brands, their paper won't bend that much. So after finishing my very first painting by using the ARTEZA Gouache paints, I really have to say that I enjoyed painting with these paints. I'm super amazed by how amazing these paints worked. I didn't expect them to be that good, especially I didn't expect them to be so opaque. Make sure you check out the description under this video because I will link the ARTEZA website and supplies that I use there. Alright guys, so that's it for today and I hope to see you in my next video.